I have been accused of stealing ideas and copying Collider video. I've seen Collider do this top 50 superhero list now, and then The Ringer came out with their own little list. And I have issues with both, but mainly due to The Ringer, because The Ringer is actually completed. I decided that I wanted to see a list made from the fans and not just a collective of people in a building. I wanted to see I wanted something that was reflective of what fans thought. And I can't do that because Collider's already doing their own superhero list. It's never been done before, so I cannot do that. Also in the news, Schmoes Know is asking Jeremy Johns and Chris Stuckman and FlickPick to stop making movie reviews because they were the first to do it. So there's that. Jaye Williams, how are you?
I'm doing good. I'm drinking what's left of a bottle of wine right now. Not much left. It's about to get weird here. I'm either going to fall asleep or try to make love to you before the end of the podcast. Probably one is going to be a greater risk than the other because we're not together right now. We're not face to face.
Yeah, but people don't know that. Shout out Beardo. I think people like our Starbucks stories. Very often on Sight and Sound, we talk about our Starbucks interactions. I figured that I would give After Schmoe a little bit of taste of this. 'Cause not only is it typically funny to me, but it's also extremely frustrating, and I'd like to know if other people have these issues with Starbucks. We have done so many of these. But look, today, I'm still drinking iced coffee because I prefer it, and it's cold here. It's cold in Kentucky now. It's like between 30 and 40 degrees this past week, and I haven't transitioned fully into hot coffee. So the past week or so, I've been getting vanilla sweet cream iced coffee because the vanilla sweet cream cold brew has been upsetting my stomach, even though it's supposed to work the opposite way, actually. But what?
Not necessarily. Are you saying that because of the acidity level?
Yeah.
But the caffeine is greater in cold brew.
Oh, that's
so maybe
true.
It's the caffeine that's messing with you a little bit.
Yeah, but I've never had caffeine disrupt my whatever system before. It's just very unlikely. I mean, I've had like 12 cans of Coke in a row before, and nothing's ever happened to me.
Yeah,
I might have exaggerated there, but
the caffeine it'll make you rush to the bathroom if you're not careful enough. Just saying.
It's okay. I have Harloff Carpool to listen to while I'm on the shitter. So, anyway, this is like the 5th time that I've gotten vanilla sweet cream iced coffee in the drive-thru, and tonight the barista thought that I was speaking another language she couldn't comprehend, that I wanted vanilla sweet cream and iced coffee because that's only in cold brew. You can't put it in another drink. I said, I want it in there, and she talked about adding cream and then vanilla flavoring, and I said, no, not that. That sounds like it's going to be too sweet. I just want vanilla sweet cream, and she goes, oh, I know what you're talking about. I said, okay, good. She goes, I didn't know if you wanted cold brew or iced coffee. I said, iced coffee. Go to the window. She hands me the drink, and it was one of those times where the cream hadn't settled yet, so it was just on the top layer, and that cool effect where you see it drizzling down, like that really cool looking. I got one of those.
It's called the cascade effect. It's cascading down the cup.
Is that a Photoshop term? Is that how you knew that?
No, it's that's literally what they call it. That's how they describe it.
Okay. So it was cascading. They hand it to me. It says cold brew on the side of the cup. So this is just yet another instance where every time I go to Starbucks, I order the same drink and it's always a different drink. And I'm sick of it. I hate it. I wonder, please, if you're listening to this and you work at Starbucks, you know someone who works at Starbucks, I want them on the show. And I need to address a few things with them. I've got a barista buddy myself, but he's no help to me. So just let me know. You can DM me.
Starbucks, get your shit together.
Sight and Sound has been feuding with Starbucks for the past year, and I'm going to carry it over into After Schmoe because we have a bigger audience here, and I think Starbucks will truly start to listen and make a change. Or at least I hope for that.
Just to sort of close this out, I was talking to somebody this week about Starbucks, and they said surely they have like a recipe that they follow. They're a big company. They're a big corporation. They must have some way that they just standardize their drinks. And I just shook my head and said, how wrong you are. I mean, that's our tagline, is that no two drinks are ever the same. And I don't mean that in a good way. That's my Rapaport laugh.
I'd like to welcome you to After Schmoe. Thank you so much for joining us. We have a special guest host today, Michael Rapaport. Thank you for joining us. Michael, how are you?
So you little bitch boys out there, okay? This isn't Marvel versus DC sitting in your fucking Dungeons and Dragons playing with stuff. We're talking about Stickman. Get out your loaf.
What a nice surprise Rapaport was today.
Thanks. It's been really nice being here. All these ants in my coffee.
I've never seen an actor know so little about movies. It goes back to what I've said about the Schmoedown before. Like, it baffles me. I mean, I get it. I get it that there are plenty of film fans who don't care about the Marvel engine. But, like, I just think it's so weird that there are people in this space that don't know anything about Marvel and DC movies. And, like, even Roca, he plays that shit. I mean, he does this all the time anyway. We've talked about this a million times on the... But no matter what the topic is in the Schmoedown, he acts like he's so fucked. And he knows plenty about Marvel and DC movies. And, like, I think the last match I saw him in, he acted like it was the biggest deal ever. It baffles me that Sam Levine is like that, and maybe that's my fault, but I guess I just assume because he's in Freaks and Geeks that he should know everything about comic book movies. Anyway, I just think it's so weird that there's an actor like Rapaport who doesn't know anything about the current landscape of Hollywood. And I don't know, maybe it doesn't interest him. I guess it clearly doesn't interest him. I just think it's a really, really strange thing. Am I off base? Is it just weird to get used to?
No, I mean, you've literally... much like you have with Collider, you've stolen my idea. You've stolen my entire take on Michael Rapaport. Not really. I have a lot of takes, a lot of thoughts on Michael Rapaport.
I've had that same take on a previous episode.
Yeah. No, look, I mean, we're coming fresh off. It's Thursday when we're recording this, and today's movie talk, I guess it would have been yesterday's movie talk if you're listening on a Friday, featured one Michael Rapaport. We've spoken a lot about him in the past. We would love to see him on the Schmoes Know live show, of course. A big, he's a frequent contributor to complex content, whether it be, maybe he's been on Sneaker Shopping, I don't know. He's been on Hot Ones before. He's done panels around the country with with Complex Brass and Mark Fernandez. He's one of Mark Fernandez's boys, so to speak. And, I mean, this is a guy who is a legitimate Renaissance man. Michael Rapaport is in every facet of pop culture you could possibly think of. He is in movies. He's in television. He is has his hand in music, in sports, in podcasting, in writing books. I mean, on YouTube. He is everywhere. And I do think it is fascinating that despite the fact that he is in the business, he still has so little knowledge of what we currently know as the sort of movie mega fandom landscape where you're sort of biting on news and hot topics and this and that. It's fascinating, and we'll get into it a little bit more. I'm going to throw it back to you in just a second, but I also think it's equally as fascinating about how much he represents certain individuals in the world, the people who are also not even below casual fans and just older fans in general.
I wonder how frustrating it is, and I didn't visit the chat. Actually, I did. I don't remember why. And I never, ever do this. I felt the need to go into the live chat and say something today. Oh, it was, they were talking about wanting a J.K. Rowling movie about her life. And there's already been a movie about J.K. Rowling's life, and I was trying to give somebody the heads up. But anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Was it like a Lifetime movie or something?
I think that's exactly what it was.
A BBC
but it was
movie?
Like
I don't know.
I mean, it was a thing. It wasn't theatrically released, of course, but I expected someone at the table to know that. But anyway, no, I didn't watch the chat to see what people's reactions were to Rapaport, but I'm sure that people were just freaking out. Think about Movie Talk's fandom, and think about what it must be like to go to the show that you watch daily for movie news, to hear people talk about, the things that they're experts in, and then to have a guy just be like, what actors are in Fantastic Beasts? I mean,
right.
I find a lot of humor in it, but I can imagine that there are plenty of people who actually take a lot of issue to him being on the show, for sure.
Well, it's important to bring up, and it's something that I talk about very frequently on here. It's about realizing the fact that this is a bubble. And if you don't realize that people are out there that have this same sort of take, you are living in your bubble. I mean, listen, this isn't disparaging towards Collider or anything, but most people, 99% of people out there, don't give a shit about a lot of this stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, they might find it interesting at one point or another, and that's obviously Collider's job, is to appeal to people that don't have this sort of impressions and takes that Michael Rapaport does, but that he's representative of a lot of people. I mean, you can walk through any workplace just down the street and just bring up extremely casual topics. Like, if you were to walk up, one of the most overly talked about topics in 2017 was whether or not Ben Affleck was going to be Batman. And I guarantee you, if you walk down the street and ask just 10 random people, maybe one person would have an idea of what you're even talking about. And that's the bubble that we live in. Here's the fascinating thing about this, though, and his appearance on this Movie Talk. Even though he is removed from this bubble that so many of us are wrapped up in, he also took the place and the position of a lot of these movie fans in this whole discussion about, this whole Netflix and watching great movies, Martin Scorsese film from your home or in a theater. This is another thing that I've been a little outspoken with, and strangely enough, Mark was the one that was sort of taking a position that I have, is the romanticism that so many moviegoers have. I've said it over and over and over again, coming from a music place and landscape in the pop culture spectrum, that a lot of movie fans are going to have to ask questions of themselves in the next 5 to 10 years about how they take in film. And I don't want to get into that discussion. That's a sight and sound sort of discussion. But Michael Rapaport's position was of somebody who was overly romanticized or overly romantic about this idea that you should never go see a Martin Scorsese movie. You should never watch it at home and this and that. Where Mark was taking the position of, you know what? I got a lot of shit to do. I'm going to watch it from home. And most people are going to want to watch it from home. And that's just the simple fact of it. And it just brings up this very interesting discussion that we don't get to have often on Movie Talk. What is your thoughts about that?
Well, I mean, as far as this topic specifically goes, I mean, if you think about something like Dunkirk, which is like a war film, and like that's the movie this year where everyone was like, yeah, you need to go to a theater to see it. I don't think The Irishman is going to be Dunkirk in that way. Like, the most current gangster film that I can kind of connect this to is something like Live by Night, with Ben Affleck's last movie. And I'm not even talking about quality here. I'm just talking about the scope of it. It's like, why would Live by Night have to be a theatrical release given the content? I mean, I would be totally fine with this being on Netflix, but I think this isn't really anything new from Ellis, because Ellis has been a champion of like seeing new releases at home instead of going to the theaters. He's talked a lot about that.
And embracing the technology that makes it more accessible for people,
well,
right? Because that's sort of the conversation.
The thing about Rapaport, though, is he's actually now on a new Netflix show. I think this is singularly because we hit the soft spot for him, which is Scorsese, which I think every time he comes on Movie Talk, he's talking about how passionate he is towards filmmakers like Tarantino and like Scorsese. So
his favorite film was Raging Bull, a Tarantino film. Or, I'm sorry, excuse me, a Scorsese film.
Scorsese, right. So I think he understands both places. I think it's just because we were specifically talking about a Scorsese film that he felt the need to express that opinion, which I get, but at the same time, you're not wrong in where you're coming from. I think that to go back to the point that you made prior to this, I don't think that it's Collider that needs to be challenged, but
no.
When it comes to, but it's definitely the fandom. And I would like, in general, I was thinking about this aside from this, I would like Ellis and Christian. I really like, and they haven't really, like, they don't shy away from this, but I want to see them do it more so. I want them to continue to challenge their fandom. And Harloff kind of does it. He kind of had to explain himself, and we'll talk about Harloff Carpool here in a minute. And, of course, he has had some glorious rants on the Schmoes Know Show. But, like, when Ellis just throws out in the middle of movie talk, he calls out someone in the chat room who's completely wrong about Kevin Spacey. The fact that he feels the need to on camera say, look, so-and-so, you're wrong about Kevin Spacey, check the facts, and then goes right into the next segment. I find that really, really fascinating. And it's getting to the point where watching you inside this landscape it's kind of rubbed off on me, and that you're showing me things that I might not have picked up on as fast as you have. And that's how toxic this fandom can really be. And I would like to see Mark and Christian really start to challenge us in that way. So I do think it's good for Rapaport to come on and show the fans, not Collider, show the fans that this is a bubble, and maybe we can start taking some of this less seriously.
I agree.
Moving forward.
There's a bit of like an abrasive sort of position I think some people take when they are inside of this bubble, and I'll use an example, and unfortunately it's a tragic example, of in the music space today. Lil Peep, the rapper Lil Peep, passed away. Rest in peace, Lil Peep. This was a huge news, massive news in the music landscape, and I just sort of for an experiment asked a lot of people, hey, what did you think about Lil Peep dying? And most people were saying, like, I have literally no idea who that is. This is a guy who is being pushed as an individual in the forefront of like an upcoming rap movement. He has 1 million followers on Instagram, okay? And most people don't know who he is. And I just think I could have taken the position as like, you don't know who Lil Peep is? How? What the hell? Like, I want to get away from that. Like, you didn't know that Ben Affleck didn't want to be Batman? It's like, just relax, okay? First of all, I don't care. I just want to see the movie. Like, that's what most people are thinking. Like, is he going to be in the movie or is he not? That's really all I care about. So it's just sort of, and I agree, the challenging aspect, because, and again, this isn't necessarily critical to Collider, but the show is called Movie Talk. And sometimes I think when we get into like a slower news cycle or whatever the case may be, we forget to talk. Okay, sometimes it's just reactions to news. It's just reporting news and buy or sell or this and that, and we forget the talk aspect. It's been a lot better lately. We had another great discussion about Rotten Tomatoes stuff between John Schnepp, Mark Ellis, and Christian Harloff early in the week, and that's sort of what I love about it. Me personally, what I'm interested in. Like, we can get the news from so many places. But there's only one place. Well, there's not one place. There's many places. But we can go to Movie Talk for this discussion on a daily basis. So that's what I like to see. And I know Collider is going through a lot of changes. And maybe, I don't know, maybe that's the future. I have no idea. But more talk on Movie Talk as opposed to just straight shooting, reporting styles of takes and whatnot.
Stay tuned, Schmoville. Anyway. You're absolutely right. I texted you right after that discussion ended. I was like, look, that Rotten Tomatoes discussion was, not only was it just a great discussion in general to have, but it was kind of fascinating to see Schnepp and Ellis gang up on Christian. you never really get anything like that.
I'm not sure whose side Schnepp was on. Like, I never figured it out. I was like, is Schnepp agreeing with Harloff or is he agreeing with Ellis?
Schnepp was taking the Jaye Williams approach, where he's inside of an argument, but secretly on both sides. but he doesn't let you into which one he actually favors.
That is 100% my take on things. Like, I will cater to both sides as long as I come across still being the likable guy. But I have my opinion. Oh, this guy's definitely right. And this guy's definitely an idiot.
I was going to say, you After Schmoe fans, you think Jay's a nice guy, but wait till you have an enigmatic argument with him. It blows your mind how he kind of weaves his way in and out of things, depending on which side of the fence he's on. It's crazy.
Absolutely. Don't double cross me, or just don't cross me at all. Don't single cross me.
I love that term, that phrase. You better not cross me. There's just something about it. We should start saying that more often.
Unless you want to get got. Look. Much like Drake, I don't take naps. So I stay woke, and I'll get you. So you better back off. Just saying.
Before we move on to Harloff Carpool, can you give me one more Rapaport laugh for the road? Oh, I can't move on because I wanted to make sure that I said it was interesting to see. I think Ellis was frustrated with him a little bit. I think that there was. I don't have a problem with the personality. I don't have a problem with Rapaport's perspective. I think it just kind of mainly came down to disruption of the flow of what we know as movie talk. And I don't recall Ellis being... Ellis definitely wasn't the host ever before with Rapaport on, but I don't remember if Ellis was ever on another Rapaport episode. So I think he was trying to navigate his way through that and just trying to make And I think Riley was having the best time. I think Riley would have hosted that episode easily.
Riley wouldn't shut the hell up. He was laughing at everything. I was like, shut up, Riley. Yeah. I can't hear what Rapaport's saying.
He's a great guy.
He's so nice.
Ellis was just kind of cranky and defensive this week, it seemed.
Okay, wait. I have to call a timeout. Here's one thing. You kind of called me out on something. I got to call you out on something. One thing that Ryan does is he will, if I haven't seen Movie Talk, he'll text me sometimes. He'll be like, oh, my God, Ellis was furious about this point. So then I'll go and watch it, and I'm like, was he? I don't know. That wasn't really my take.
You literally do the exact same thing.
So I was watching this Movie Talk, and I was ready to be like, dude, there's nothing in this at all. However, there was a few moments where I felt I don't necessarily know if he was annoyed outside of the fact that, like, I think there might have been. I think when Campia was hosting, whenever there would be disagreements, there would be, like, actually we'll give Campia a lot of credit. He would let people make their points, and he would just go back and make his point if it was a disagreement, but it was rarely sort of across the table, like arguing discussion sort of thing. Obviously in a good-hearted manner, like nobody's ever getting in people's faces or anything like that, but it was more of it felt more like a conversation. It's like, nah, I'm not gonna let you go there, sort of thing. And obviously Mark was respectful for it, but I do have to just say, listen, when you get Rapaport on your show, you know what you're signing up for, okay? Especially, he's been here multiple times now. You know what you're getting. He's brought in for one reason and one reason only, and that's to bring the Michael Rapaport fire that he does. He and Mark Fernandez are obviously really close. That's why you see him on so much complex stuff. And it is hilarious to me, and we're about to get into Carpool, that Christian is sort of making this like mental note about how, a lot of kids watch Collider content, and he's like, okay, so I'm sort of isolating it. Like, Collider content, some kids watch it. I'm going to be a little bit more PG there. And Schmoes can be a little bit more adult. And then my Carpool, I can just go all out. And then Mark Fernandez is like, and here's Michael Rapaport. It's just like, kids need to tune out as quickly as possible. Yes. And just watching that entire episode with that sort of context, like, Christian, I'm going to be a little bit more PG. I was just like, oh, man. Obviously, this isn't like a memo that, Perry or Wendy Lee sent out about being more PG on Collider, because Mark Fernandez was like, yeah, I'm just going to throw Rapaport on there, and he's going to drop some absolute molten lava fire.
It's such a weird mystery. And like towards the beginning of After Schmoe, we talked a lot about like what the actual guidelines are in-house. Like, what is their take on when they cuss? And we've heard a little bit more about that on Jedi Council, but, like, just last week, Christian started off Jedi Council and just threw out "you little shit" or something like that. It was
Right.
Christian has been bizarre opening Jedi Council recently. But, yeah, he opened with a "you little shit" right before he introduced the panel, so I just thought that was really strange.
Well, hey, I actually want to ask you this question because I think one of the best things about, and this would be a great way to transition into Harloff Carpool, is that watching his show has shed a lot of light on probably more of the behind-the-scenes stuff with Collider than we've ever gotten, and I think just because we pay such close attention to everything, we can pick up on things here and there. But the thing that I'm starting to realize, and I want to know if you agree with me on this or not, is that a lot of the shows sort of govern themselves. Like, Mark obviously governs Movie Talk. Like,
well, you mean because Christian is just late to work every day and yet everything still functions without him?
Well, no, he was talking about the fact that, Mark will yell at him for not doing something, or he has to make sure he does this, or Mark's going to get pissed. And it's just like, yeah, it's Mark's show. I like that. I like that fact. And how Harloff can set his own rules for his own show on Jedi Council. Obviously, Josh McCouga can set his own. Oh, wait, never mind. Like, there's just, I like that about Collider. I mean, like I said, I don't know if everybody's getting all the memos, but you know what? Keep doing you. I'm fascinated by it. But I would love to know that. Like, what does everybody just have to understand across the board that, like, on Wednesdays you get to wear shorts? I don't know, whatever it may be.
I would like to see, you brought up McCouga, and I thought about this last night.
There's a lot more about him later.
Yeah. But him sitting there at the live show, it made me realize he still works at Collider.
I know, right?
What are you doing?
What has he been doing? He's that guy now. Who is that?
So what? Yeah, he has become Alicia Gaynor, essentially.
No, he's been Frank or whoever the hell that guy is.
Right.
Has McCouga ever edited anything in his life?
McCouga has been demoted to Jonathan Voitko. So I think Christian should let McCouga have, like, I know McCouga has the Josh McCouga show, whatever, but McCouga needs another outlet. So I would like to see, like, maybe there's a B-sides, or like maybe another Facebook Live where Christian and McCouga go to Panera or something. Like, give McCouga some kind of outlet throughout the week. I think that's the least that you could do, Christian.
Or start your own, like, Schmoes Know podcast feed. Oh yeah, that exists. Why isn't the Josh McCouga show distributed on SK Plus?
I don't know. I have no idea. But does SK Plus need another show?
No, it doesn't.
I was gonna say, if we
can
take
take
on
Beardo's
the Josh
place.
What did I say, by the way, last week? I said Beardo was going. I think my example was Justice League, but he put out Thor Ragnarok.
You know how I know Beardo doesn't listen to this show? Because if he did, he would hate us. He would literally hate us. I love Beardo. I really do love Beardo, but
why is he such an easy target, though? I don't know what it is. What is it about him? I've never had a conversation with him. I have talked to pretty much 90% of the personalities in that building. I have never had a conversation with Beardo. Yet maybe it's Copster's attitude towards him, or maybe Ken's attitude towards Beardo, that makes him a target for us. And for whatever reason, we just enjoy calling out this stranger.
I'm not trying to be like a dick or anything here, but I would legitimately love to sit down with Beardo and, like, help him figure out what these shows without him interviewing people could be. Like, you don't need so many Q&As. That's my thing. I'm sorry. This is I don't know. It can be great, Beardo. It can be great. And I love you. I just want what's best for you.
All right, let's talk about Carpool. So, for one, last week I was poking a little fun at it, even though I did thoroughly enjoy it last week. And so my question last week was, how will this be sustained? Well, Christian did a pretty damn good job sustaining it this week. I have some kind of weird fascination with this. It's like an obsession. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's because we get so little of Harloff lately, or maybe this type of Harloff where he is so open. to talking about things, and because he puts out Harloff podcasts and it has to be about everybody else. So having Harloff just babble on about himself, you kind of forget how interesting he actually is as a personality, and even more so than just his movie takes. So I was thinking, why doesn't he just make these an audio version? Because this is essentially his Bill Burr's Monday morning podcast.
Right.
Is essentially what this is. And again, last week I was kind of making fun of it, but this week I was like, oh my God, I have so many ideas. Like, I was fascinated that he got that flat tire. Like, I laughed my ass off, and it felt like a sitcom. Like, now it's going to, come back up in an Uber. And I loved how he was involving the driver a little bit and making comments. And I wish every show, or maybe it's like Uber Wednesdays, where Christian takes an Uber and has to interact with I don't know. I just had so many fun ideas. But ultimately, this is just a weird obsession. I think that you can take Harloff wherever you go now. And he went with me into the shower and on the shitter, and I don't know. It's just been a really fun week with the Carpool show, and I have to admit I was absolutely one of the people who messaged him about getting a phone mount, and he did text me, just send it to me, and then I sent him a link and never heard from him again.
Yeah, I mean, as it goes, look, coming from somebody who does does a podcast every single week solo,
what?
It's tough and it's weird, and you kind of got to get into a groove with it. That groove period never existed for Christian. I mean, it's been great every single week, and I love sort of the versatility of things that he can talk about, and just in general, he's a natural born entertainer as it is. And I think you're right. I think the fact that we haven't had as much Christian on Collider and Schmoes stuff lately, I think this sort of fills that void, and it's just so candid, that like he is free to talk about whatever he wants. And I've wondered, maybe or not, like, should we even be covering this? I think we should be, personally, and until he's just like, guys, don't talk about this, then I think we should talk about it every single week. But so much interesting things, like this week, or I'm sorry, not this week, today he covered his pretty much his entire story and background with WWE, which, those are stories I've heard before, but just, I guess, in this setting, it was still incredibly interesting. I love hearing sort of his, because we don't listen. I've heard the Schmoe Know Rundown guys talk about the feedback that they get from Christian and notes about doing this and that with the show. We don't get that, so I'm like, I mean, sometimes we do, but we just, as a whole, we don't. And I'm just saying to myself, we're doing something right, and that's cool. He's just letting us do our thing. But it is nice to hear him comment on things that we do, especially because we're getting so deep inside baseball with stuff in Collider and Schmoes. It's fascinating, and it's nice to know that, like, he thinks we're on the right track with stuff too, giving us his stamp of approval. And yeah, I appreciate it. I like the show.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because prior to this show's existence, I was about to ask Christian, hey, you need to talk about After Schmoe on Collider, because we covered just as much Collider. And now I don't feel the need to do that, because we get some love on there.
It's also fun because I'm sure most people do, but I get the notification on my phone. It's an interesting time when this comes on, because sometimes it comes on right at 11, sometimes it comes on at 10:45, and I go to lunch at noon, so I'm like ready for it to be done. One day I ended up walking out with it going while I was walking out to my car to leave for lunch, and it was sort of wrapping up. But it's just such an interesting show, and I appreciate it so much that I don't want him to ever stop doing it, I think is the point. Just never stop doing it.
We have made fun of Christian's critiques before. Jay and I are always fascinated by what he picks out from our show and decides, like, what there are so many weird things that he hears on After Schmoe and thinks that's what I need to text them about. And sometimes it's some of the most obscure, like, throwaway lines. It's never about, like, the real stuff, not about the real speculation. He never settles any of that. So our example, I think this example came from like 2 weeks ago. Emma Fife did go to that event for Schmoes. I sent her myself. That's my favorite line. I sent her myself. And you guys are dead wrong on why I started watching The Leftovers. Until you talked about it, I had no idea, like, I was even in Star Wars. I don't know what that means.
You know what? Well, I figured that out. They were joking about it this week. I knew when you sent that to me, I thought to myself, he's got to be voice texting right now. And they sort of confirmed that. You're right. I don't understand why he picks out certain things. Like with the Leftovers thing, that's been a bit for so long. Christian hates TV, and the only time he's ever interested in TV or interested in anything outside of Star Wars and just movies in general is if it involves Star Wars and movies in general. So there's just been like an ongoing joke. He became like the people that comment that I'm like, we know, we know. Yeah. It's fine.
In about a month's time, I'm going to get a text. By the way, I've known for a long time who Childish Gambino is.
Or he's going to be like, by the way, I've known for a long time that you've been joking about this.
You're right.
Okay, cool.
The last thing about the carpools today, the last thing he addressed was something we talked about what kind of music he listens to. And I just always think it's funny. Oh, not just him, anybody. I love when people say, oh, I listen to everything. And then they name something specific that they listen to and nothing else. Like, I know that he loves the Doors and hip hop, but what was specific is the timeline where all of this music takes place. So when people say, oh, I listen to everything, 90% of the time, they don't mean that. There's no way that we could give Christians the kind of music we listen to, and he'd be like, oh, okay, yeah. So I just kind of thought that was funny. You're a music guy. You've picked up on that, right? You agree with me.
Yeah, I mean, you know, okay. I'm that douchey guy that says, "Oh, you listen to everything." What would that be? Because I listen to everything. No, I don't really.
And then they say,
really think that.
And then they're like, "Oh, Taylor Swift."
No, you know, I'm pretty accepting of all of that. Listen, my takeaway, being a music guy, from Harloff's, discussions and whatnot, and his revelations he's made, is that Harloff's a hip-hop head, and I appreciate that about him. I mean, you know, he was digging deep on like some third bass stuff and just all kinds of different, classic hip-hop, and I appreciate that about him. I'd love to talk to him about that one day. It's probably not going to happen, but yeah. Come on, Sight and Sound. I'm busy. I have a kid. We know.
Congratulations to the Bibbs and Whitney on their first episode of Critically Acclaimed. It was Jay. It was one hell of an episode. I really appreciated it. It's instantly become my favorite show on SK Plus.
Yeah, I don't know if I would say it's my instant favorite show on SK Plus. There's a lot of great shows on SK Plus, like ours, Sight and Sound. But those guys just have fantastic conversations. There's a reason why their podcast exists on the feed. I mean, they've been doing it for so long. You can listen to Bibiani talk about just about anything. He sort of dominates conversations, so it's nice to have Whitney on there as well. I look forward to listening to more of their episodes.
What was your favorite part of this episode?
I mean, I just love their dynamic. I think their dynamic is fascinating and just interesting in general. I think it's an interesting concept. I didn't get to catch the entire thing. But, yeah, they just have great chemistry, I mean, you and I, we're a two-person team, and I can pick up on that, and I can respect that. Those individuals that have the sort of two-person back-and-forth dynamic.
You're so good at that.
I'm pretty good at it. How do you think I get through Sight and Sound Weekly every single week?
I fully expected you to be like, I really love their introduction.
When I say I can podcast literally about anything, I can. So sharpen these skills while I'm at work. Like, how can I absolutely bullshit something on a podcast? If you haven't picked up on it, we didn't listen to the show. So I'm just gonna pull back the curtain. We didn't listen to it. Just gonna let that linger. Think about it, what you might.
I don't feel bad.
Are you not entertained?
I don't feel bad this time because there is so little time for me to consume any SK Plus show, and it's getting overwhelming. But what's amazing is that there are always people that are there. Out in Schmoeville, out in Schmoe too.
What a ridiculous statement. I love it. It's hilarious. The best thing about Collider is I know it's always on. It's always
that's
something
not where I
new
was
to
going.
take in. Sorry. Go
No,
ahead.
I was moving the spotlight off of me and turning it to Schmoeville, and just I wanted to direct the attention to how great the fans are for being able to consume all of these shows, whether I do or not. That's where I was going with that.
I know there's a lot of people listening to this. I need the person who had this take for critically acclaimed. I need you to comment right now and raise your hand and say, this is me. If you thought to yourself, they canceled TV Talk for this, I want you to comment right now and say, yes, I had that specific thought. Or if you're the person that instantly could not sleep because you said to yourself, how am I supposed to take in all of this content? I need you to raise your hand and tell me, because I know that those people exist.
The last thing that I want to bring up, and then Jay and I will take a quick break. Campia got destroyed on Twitter.
All right, let's talk about some Schmoes Know live show. I don't know.
I just set up a break. Let me go get my shitty iced coffee that I ordered.
All right, I'm gonna go pour myself some wine.
This coffee sucks ass. Let's talk about Schmoes Know Show number 309. Hosted by Mark Ellis, of course. So we had Ken Knapsack, Joelle Monique, and Makuga at the main table to start. I feel like this is going to take us 5 minutes to cover this episode. But before that, Jaye Williams. I think it was last week. Maybe it was last week. You had the shortest Jaye Williams stream of consciousness notes. Does this week's list rival that one?
It definitely surpasses it. I actually have two things before I get into this. One, I got a little wordy in my notes, which is interesting. I don't even remember taking these. And I did something a little bit different this week. I want to see if you can pick up on it. Are you ready?
Yes.
These are your Schmoes Know stream of conscious notes brought to you by sitesoundpod.com. Need to renew that domain. Has Josh Makuga ever been to a screening? Oh, never mind. Mark literally confirmed my joke. Thanks, Mark. Cobster looking great with that beard. Makuga literally has no idea what Beardo's name is. Now it's not a joke if the joke has become reality. What the hell? There are ants? No wonder they're moving... Wait, what is it? No wonder they're moving Fernandez doesn't do ants. What? Okay. Fire up the jet. I don't know what that means. Shout out to John Calipari. I'm glad Makuga is on for this Justice League discussion. It's like they brought him out as a sacrificial lamb to be negative about the film, and he probably doesn't give a shit if people are pissed at him or not. Oh, hey, Ken. Makuga's take on Justice League is literally the complete opposite of what I've heard about this film in almost every way possible, and it's great. Hashtag press privilege. Note to Ryan, let's talk about this. Ace wearing the Perry pants again. Did people just collectively say Dark Knight Rises is a terrible film? I'm not a massive fan of the movie, but I just heard the word terrible in the discussion.
Wrong.
Oh, hey, it's Danny. Look at that dog. It's cute. But get it off the couch. Ace's camera is out of focus. Oh shit, we're talking about edibles. And those are your stream of conscious notes. Schmoes Know stream of conscious notes brought to you by sitesoundpod.com. I'm obviously off my game. It's the wine. I apologize.
Hey, remember when Makuga had that take on TV Talk when Stranger Things wasn't that good of a show in retrospect, and then season 2 became event fucking television?
Yeah, but it's one of the most divisive seasons of TV. I've never seen more people be so opposite on a television show than that show. Like, we loved it, but there's a lot of people out there that thought it wasn't great. Sorry, that's a sidebar.
Well, I don't know any of those people, but the reason why I said that is because there is no excuse, there's no reason that The Dark Knight Rises has just suddenly become trash. Like, I'm not arguing.
That seems to happen in the movie community.
Yeah.
In this movie, like, fandom community. It's like overnight things are just like, remember when everybody thought that Guillermo del Toro just wasn't that great of a director, or what's the dude that did District 9? Why am I forgetting his name?
Neil Blomkamp.
Oh, yeah, he's obviously on a downturn of his career. It's like, I never even saw Chappie, but I didn't hear that it was just straight trash.
It's not that big of a deal. People are so, and it's funny you brought up Chappie because I talked about that this week. It's because it came from a guy who set really high expectations for himself. But if it was any other director and this movie came from out of nowhere, I'm not saying it would blow people away, but people wouldn't. Like, there would be no reason to go outside of your way to just suddenly trash that film. I mean, it's fine. It's whatever. It might be forgettable, but there's no reason why you just should start trashing it all of a sudden. Anyway, that's a whole other side.
It is kind of funny because I remember it was earlier this year where I rewatched The Dark Knight Rises, and I know we're not here to talk about this, but I rewatched The Dark Knight Rises, and I thought to myself, man, this movie is really flawed. Like, I have some pretty glaring issues with it, and I remember bringing it up, like, in a public forum, and people being like, you're crazy, you're ridiculous, da-da-da-da, get out of here. And now I'm like, okay, we just don't think the movie's good anymore. Okay, fair enough.
Well, I'm not even contesting that. I mean, I even think that there are some boring parts and some things that I don't know if they quite make sense. I have a problem with Bruce Wayne just suddenly showing. Anyway, we're pissing off Christian. Well, they didn't talk about movies this week, so somebody's got to.
I want to talk about Makuga. So we got right into Justice League talk pretty much off the bat. I want to come back to the ants in the studio for a second, or in just a second. But this whole first of all, how in the hell did Josh Makuga get this? He was one of 3 people that had seen the movie in the studio, which was hilarious.
I know why.
But
I know why.
But why is that? Why did that happen?
He's the only one that works in the studio who has nothing to fucking do.
Oh, boy. Okay.
Everyone was like, I got to work on the Schmoe down. Thad was like, I got to work on the Schmoe down. So that left Makuga to be able to.
Well, it was just fascinating to me, and I like it. Like, I legitimately enjoy, like, these sort of hot takes and going against the grain. I legitimately don't think he cares. Like, that's one thing with Christian and his Carpool show is that he talked a lot this week about being conscious and being worried about what the backlash was going to be about this DC film if he didn't enjoy it and didn't like it. Makuga doesn't give a fuck. He just does not care about that at all, and I appreciate that about him. But it is hilarious. Every single thing he said was like the opposite of what I've heard. Like the praises of the film, like people saying that the Flash was one of the main standout characters. He's just like, I hated the Flash.
He loves Cyborg the most. I haven't heard Cyborg get a whole lot of love.
Yeah, it was just fascinating to me, like how that was his take. But I get it and I appreciate it. I think that's. I feel like every time I see a movie brought up on Top 50 where almost every single person is like, oh, I totally think this film should be higher, I feel like Josh Makuga is the one that like weighted it back. Like he's like, this movie shouldn't even, The Dark Knight shouldn't even be on the list, please. It's just like I don't even like what. I need to know what comic book movies you like. Like, tell me which ones you like.
I hope.
So that way I can sort of gauge it.
I hope that that's actually the case when it comes to The Dark Knight, because I am going to get so frustrated and annoyed if we get to this list and number 1 is just The Dark Knight. Like, for some reason that annoys me as a movie fan. Like, if and when I decide to make my own version of this list, I will go out of my way to prevent The Dark Knight from being number 1, just so it isn't like every other list. I know that completely goes against everything that I said before about wanting it to be a list of the people, but
yeah, I mean, The Dark Knight isn't even my favorite Batman film, so
yeah,
take
me neither.
That for what you will.
Yeah. Okay. So, yes, the Beardo Makuga was really, really interesting this week. I really loved the fact that he didn't know Beardo's name, and we'll come back around to Makuga at the end of the show when we get to Cody's little best man game.
He was sort of flourishing in his own Makuga way on the Schmoes Know Show this week, just because he hadn't been on camera that much, and I feel like he was really letting out all of his like Makuga isms on this episode.
I mean, it was one bad joke after another. It was crazy. He was filled with puns this week. Going
Why do you
nuts.
all hate Makuga? Why do you all hate Makuga so much?
Sometimes
it's not the case. It's not the case.
Have you ever? Let me ask you this. Have you ever kind of, I know we've kind of made a lot of fun and made up Mark Fernandez flying us out on his jet or whatever. And have you ever kind of like daydreamed what your first interactions would be like with these people after doing After Schmoe for so long?
Well, I mean, I legitimately don't think Makuga would even know what we do every day. Like,
I'm glad you went straight to Makuga, because that's actually what I was gonna bring up. I think I daydream.
I mean, Christian didn't even like me the first time. He's like, that guy, fuck that guy.
I think I daydream about my interaction with Makuga the most. Even though we've had a full-blown conversation on this fucking podcast, I still think it would count as our first interaction. I daydream about that a lot, and I'll just leave it at that.
Here's what I want you to do. I want you to walk up to him with your phone, and I want you to say, "This is my screen name. Please fucking follow me."
I love going through Time Hop every day, and earlier this past week I came across a tweet that was from like a year or two ago, and I hit tweeted at Makuga and a couple other people, and I just simply said, "Makuga, we didn't do anything. Chill the fuck out." And that was this week on my Time Hop. Anyway, right. let's talk about let's talk about all the wangers. So we got Ace and RB3 on the couch at the start. I love the little morning show. I know Ellis does as well. And they did talk a long time about this whole marathon thing. I found very interesting. I'm also very curious who this professional runner is. This Allen guy that I can only assume that Perry is saying. You know, because Ace just acted like this guy came from out of nowhere and he wouldn't really give us any specifics. So I'm curious. I don't know how. I mean, did she break up with Frank?
I don't think she was dating Frank. I mean, I have noticed we haven't been seeing as much Perry lately either, because she's been tied up in this new
YouTube channel.
Romance that she's her YouTube channel. She's obviously leaving Collider, and this new romance that's flourishing between her and Alan. Obviously, Ace was there wearing the Perry pants. Obviously, because it's someone has come between he and Perry. I'm not insinuating anything necessarily, but you could tell there was some bitterness there. The Thor imposter caught his eye while running, which is strange. That could have either been the dehydration, the cramp, or just the fact that he loved Taika Waititi's latest film, Thor Ragnarok.
What if Alan is just another name, another personality, another ego for Ace? And Ace is Alan. And Ace actually came in first place of this entire race. And he shares pants with Perry.
This is some Mr. Robot shit, honestly, but which Christian has obviously seen. But I think it's fascinating to me, this whole idea. You know how there's some people in the world that are just like the nicest guys, and all you want to do is spend time with them. Remember Juan? Remember our friend Juan?
What a great fucking guy. Holy shit.
I feel like that's Alan. Like one day, Alan, they're going to bring back TV talk, and Alan's going to be the host. And, Alan is going to be the one that plugs After Schmoe on Collider and stuff like that. And Alan is going to be the guy that flies us out to California. You know what? These guys work really hard. Mark Fernandez, gas up the jet. It's going to be Alan.
I really like this guy, Alan. I really do.
We've never talked about it before, but what would be the perfect Collider employee for us personally? It would be Alan, this perception of Alan that I have right now.
Also want to point out the fact that because Christian was nowhere near the show and Ellis was hosting, Joel Monique had no reason to do the After Schmoe Notes segment that we were promised so many weeks ago. So somebody get on that. Christian, we need you back promptly. To kind of go back to, well, they did a little bit of the Rotten Tomatoes discussion here, by the way, which I thought was, again, another great discussion. And the perfect place to do it. Again, of course. I also really appreciated Cobster's take. I know that we had a problem with the Dark Knight Rises take, but I actually like Cobster's take on 89 Batman. I think he's right, and everybody needs to chill out.
Yeah, I think he's off base, but that's fine. Everybody can have their own opinions on anything.
No.
Here's my main issue, and it's not specifically directed with Cobster. One of the things that I appreciate about Collider and Schmoes and Schmoville, for the most part, is people relatively, and I'm speaking very generally, people give everyone room for their opinions. It's like, you know, they say things like, me personally, I don't enjoy that film, and I don't understand why other people do it. But for people, what the conversation and the language that I don't like. And Christian brought this up, like the difference between a good comment and a bad comment.
Right.
The sort of language I don't like are things like, that movie's terrible, this movie is not good. It's just like very isolating. But you know what? That sort of makes up Cobster's sort of persona. He is a guy that's just like, I'm going to cut you. I'm going to cut you with a knife. I'm going to get you right now.
Wow.
Don't cross me.
It's really dark. This has been a weird... like last 10 or 15 minutes. I don't know what you and I are doing here. I'm totally cool with it, but I think it's a product of the Schmoes Know Show that we got this week, which for some reason we just like we didn't respond to when it as far as like coming up with things to talk about.
Well, for me personally, the episode was sort of split into threes. I really enjoyed the Justice League discussion overall, just because it got like deeper and deeper. They started out talking about the film itself, and then they talked about actually previewing it, and then they dove even deeper into, you know, just DC stuff in general. And I like that. The second half of the show obviously was this interview, or not the second half, but the middle third of the show was this whole discussion and interview with this director about this cooking movie, which was a mockumentary. I was sort of struggling what was going on with this whole thing, because it was a movie, but then she was talking about being on a cooking show, and then people were talking about groundlings.
She was talking about, well, she's a performer. So she has an improv background, and so did the cast. But she was talking about how she had experience doing the salad. Well, you wouldn't call it a cook-off, but a salad off. Sounds sexual. So she had experience doing these things, and then it came into a movie, an improv movie that she started years ago, and it was like a Boyhood style where it took like 10 years to like fully get made, and it's just now being released. So she was like referencing scenes where she's like lighting a salad on fire that actually like happened 10 years ago. And so it was a lot of that, and I thought that story was really, really fascinating. Of course, I perked up when I heard that this was a Curb Your Enthusiasm style way to make a movie. I was like, oh, I'm really intrigued by this. So that has me curious. By the way, just while we're on the topic of directors as guests, the director that was on 2 weeks ago that directed Mayhem with Glenn from Walking Dead, apparently that's like in the 90s on Rotten Tomatoes.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I'm definitely curious about that movie now, and I think it might be the first time that I actually watch a movie that was directed by a guest on Schmoes.
Well, that's actually an interesting thing, and I apologize for not having a history lesson this week, but one thing that I have noticed going through my sort of history lesson, playing catch up with the show and whatnot, is that I feel like Schmoes Know, maybe not all the time with every single guest, but they're sort of on the cutting edge of the guests that they bring on. I remember they had the guy that played Walter Jr. Is it R.J. Mitty?
Yeah,
his name?
R.J. Mitty.
From Breaking Bad, and it's just like that was right when the finale was going to come on, and I feel like that's a show that over time people are looking back on and they're like, man, Breaking Bad's fucking great, obviously. Sean Astin was, you know, a 2-time guest on the show. He was just in Stranger Things too. It's just fascinating. You sort of see all these people that sort of pop up over the years and where their careers move on to after that. And obviously, I think the director that you're speaking of, this Mayhem film that's getting some recognition, is also sort of speaking to that. It's interesting. I would love to know how. And I mean, I'm sure it's just as simple as like a PR team reaching out and this and that, but I would love to know sort of their method to getting guests on. And we talk a lot of times about how sometimes, for better or for worse, whatever, that sometimes the Schmoes Know live show can feel a little bit like an afterthought with everything going on in the Collider space. Like, it's kind of, I think we forget sometimes that you have to prepare for stuff like this. You have to prepare for these professional industry level sort of interviews.
And that credit goes to Copster for that as well.
Absolutely.
Getting that stuff together.
Absolutely. So that's sort of fascinating. Yeah, as well.
Let's talk about Danny Fernandez for a minute.
Let's do it. For me, the highlight of the third part of the show. Like the show is broken up to Justice League talk, this interview, and even though it was supposed to encompass this game and everything else, for me, Danny Fernandez and the dog
Molly
definitely took Molly. They took over. They stole the show towards the end.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we all say Molly's name because apparently Ellis treats this dog as another human being, as a daughter. So I wanted to properly call her by her name.
You want to say the name right? Like, were people going to think its name was like Molly or Molai or something like that?
Danny Fernandez is someone that I've followed on Twitter probably just as long as I've followed Mark. I mean, I feel like they've kind of been synonymous. I mean, I remember him referencing her the first time I saw him do stand-up and a couple of jokes and things like that. So, part of me feels like I've been in the relationship with him.
It's weird, but I know what that feels like.
It's also how I feel about you and your girlfriend.
That's what I'm speaking to right now.
So anyway, Danny Fernandez, I have always thought very highly of her for multiple reasons. The most recent example is how much of a champion she was for all of the victims involved who were fighting against Defy and Andy Signor. That Danny I've seen consistently since I followed her on Twitter. She has just always been a Wonder Woman, and I've just always thought very highly of her. And she's also just insanely funny, very, very talented woman. And very shortly after I followed her, I remember texting Ellis asking him why she wasn't on Collider content, why she wasn't on Schmoes Know, and I never got an answer. I'm not trying to be funny, but I just never got an answer for that. But I always just assumed that over time, like, either she had a problem with Campia or it was just a matter of them not wanting to mix their business with their relationship, which I would totally understand. But it's just kind of funny how it just feels like this appearance just kind of like fell into our laps. Like it just wasn't a big deal and just came from out of nowhere, and she wasn't there to do anything specifically. So part of me wishes that like this would have happened a long time ago. But I've just been such a big fan. She's also a huge voice when it comes to mental illness, and I don't know. Anyway, I'm very happy that she was finally able to come on the show. She was great, like you said. I think she was probably the best portion of the show was the parts that she was on leading up until the end. So anyway, I'm just a big fan overall. I'm very happy to see her on the show. What was your take?
I mean, I think we talk a lot about the curse of the fourth chair and this and that, and I just thought that she was a natural, man. I mean, you can tell that she's been around Mark. She's been around Mark. She's been around this whole crew. She felt so comfortable to just sort of come in and sort of put her stamp on the show. Yeah. And I appreciated that. She had no problem taking part in some of these conversations and these discussions. Obviously, her and Mark had a very nice chemistry together, going back and forth that sort of worked in Mark's favor. for him being the host, I think. But listen, I'm not going to let this conversation leave. I'm not going to leave this show without addressing something that we've talked about fairly frequently here, and that's the fact that we've been very outspoken about how sometimes we, for right or wrong, right, wrong, or indifferent, we get a little bit weirded out anytime like marijuana is brought up on the show. And they just and I'm totally fine with it. Like, I don't care. It's just kind of funny because they don't really talk about it much, and there's really no reason for them not to talk about it much. But they just had this really open discussion about seeing movies on edibles, and to my knowledge, at least from what I've heard, we just haven't had those open types of discussion that much on the show, and it always brings back up to mind the conversation we've had of who partakes in the devil's lettuce and who doesn't. But the one that's weirded me out the most was Mark, because I've heard him on Beardo. I've heard him talk about the fact that weed just isn't his thing. It's primarily smoking it, but him eating it and participating like this was sort of interesting to me. I was like, how often is this a thing? I want to know. It's interesting.
He's mentioned to me before that he is a big fan of CBD, but I'm with you. I didn't know that he partaked, and I don't feel like that's. I mean, I'm sure he just does it sparingly or just whenever. But the way they made it sound, they made it seem like that was their in the concession stand of the theater. For whatever reason, they made it sound like they got it in the lobby before going in. I don't know. That's just how I took it. But again, we've talked about it before. It is kind of weird to hear them talk about that, but not for any really valid reason. But
well, that's something that I've in fact, it was actually going to be one of the questions the time that I called in. I just never got around to it. But I would actually love for them to, so much of the Schmoes Know Show is directed towards whatever's going on in that week, and I get that. I get why that is. But if there's ever a week where, if we're doing a Mark Wahlberg versus Will Ferrell week, why not just open the conversation up to movie going experiences under the influence or something like that? Whether it be what movies are your favorite movies to have a glass of wine to, or just have a drinking game and get smashed or whatever. I'm not saying they need to sit around and advocate it by any means.
Hell
but,
yeah.
Just have a fun conversation about it. Especially if Christian was on, I would love, I know he's a big fan of
cocaine.
Cocaine. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Obviously, that's a relatively psychedelic type of film. I would want to know, has he ever seen that movie High and this and that? Because again, I know it's not obviously a legal substance all over the entire country, but it is 100% legal in California. And these are conversations that they can have. They shouldn't have to feel weird and like it's this taboo subject for them to talk about.
Which is why it's such a ridiculous thing to have such a negative stigma. The government is deciding case by case what your moralities are across the country, and as far as I'm concerned, it's not a big deal, no matter what. But anyway, the best man game. So I know we like to give Makuga a hard time, and I might be analyzing this a little bit too much, but I don't think there was any reason why anyone other than RB3 should have won. Because he was the first, and I'm not going to take your point because I know that you have a point to make. Well, why don't you just go ahead and say it, and then I can build off your point.
Well, I was just under the impression of going into the game, I like the idea of a Mad Lib sort of game to sort of do something like this. I think that's funny. But I think the jokes sort of wore off at one point or another, because it was so repetitive. I thought that maybe everybody was going to have a slightly different Mad Lib, and maybe some were better than the others, and it was like a luck of the draw sort of thing. And but just the fact that they were just repeating the same story over and over and over again, and the only thing that was different were these Mad Lib sort of things. It's just after a while, I was kind of okay, the joke just became less and less funny. I know that's being critical of the entire idea, and you know what? That's fine. That's sort of what we're here to do, sort of discuss it. That was just my take on it. Maybe people absolutely loved it, and that's fine too. And hopefully they did. But just after a while, just got a little bit. I was like, all right, okay, we get it now.
I just thought it was weird how, like, okay, your point was that you wish everyone had a different Mad Lib, but I just thought that, like, the parts that weren't inserted, like the actual written text, I thought that it was oddly specific. So that's what I think that's what you're talking about. It was just they talked about I don't even remember anymore.
Well, but I think I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like what you're referring to is the fact that the story itself was already
specific,
like
weird,
absurd enough that like you could have just left out you could have just left the spaces blank and it would have just been as wacky and quirky and whatever. But so I mean, I see that. I think obviously, you know, I mean, we're like really reviewing this thing, but you know, it's fine. It's a fun story, and maybe it was something they just came up with. I don't know. But Josh McCoog is good at this. I do think he's good at coming up with games and interesting games. That would have never in a million years been my first thing.
Well,
to be like, you know what? Let's do a Mad Lib.
Well, to all the people that are, you guys pick on McCoog too much. This was actually Mark Ellis's idea, so we're going after Mark Ellis this time. There you go.
Well, yeah, I mean, I like the idea. It was the execution of the idea on McCoog's behalf.
I thought you were doing that thing where I thought you were changing your take entirely because I said it was Ellis's idea. I thought you were going to start praising the segment now that I brought that up. That would have been amazing.
But I mean, it has its positives and its negatives. I think it's a good idea. I think if they ever do this again, the thing that I would like to see is them change up the ad lib for everybody, not have it be so repetitive. That's really my only criticism. Even though I sort of picked it apart, that's my only criticism. I would like to see them have different stories for everybody.
Well, I think it's about that time we get off here. I'm gonna throw away this coffee, and I think I'm gonna crack open an ice cold LaCroix.
There you go. Not La Croix.
LaCroix.
Not whatever other people might think it's called. Listen, I'm not going to say where I live, but I live in a town that is called something else in other places in the world, but we call it something completely different and completely wrong. But by God,
Louisville.
We live in America, okay? Here, I need you to start humming like some sort of patriotic song. We live in America, and we're going to say things how we want to, okay? This is not some foreign country, okay? You always have to be right about how you pronounce things, please. It's just not a big deal, okay? Just relax. We'll say it how we want. We're going to stand up for what we believe in because this is America, God damn it. So lay off, Christian Harloff. Go drive a car.
Kazakhstan.
All right, that's enough. That's enough. You've had enough. You've had enough. Where can they find you online?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at WhatUpSnell. Hit me up on Instagram. More people are following me on Twitter, and that's great. But you know, I've got an Instagram too. Come hang out with me there.
Yeah, he's doing some things. He's doing some things over there.
Yeah.
Hey, kid, I'm gonna criticize your Instagram. Please don't take pictures of yourself pooping. Okay, I've seen that before.
Wait, what?
It's not funny. It's not funny.
Take pictures of me pooping.
Yeah, I've seen a picture on Instagram where just of your feet. We're sitting on the shitter.
That was really clever. It was when we had the Snapchat filter for Views, the Drake album, and so I put Views, and it was a picture of my pants at my ankles on the toilet. You acted like I took a picture of my shit in the toilet or my face being red. It was a harmless picture, and it was pretty clever.
Red? What the hell are you doing on the toilet?
Well,
struggling over
I have issues.
My Lord. Listen, just, keep it PG. We're on Collider.
That was also like a year and a half ago, whenever Views came out.
666.
Christian knows what I'm talking about.
I don't take naps.
Anyway, Instagram and the Sight and Sound and everything's in the description. Jaye Williams, where are you at?
You can find me on the 6 side, holding it down. I'm a no long talker. At Jaye Williams, J to the A to the Y to the E on Twitter and Instagram. It's the same for both. I also do a music show every single Friday. Some call it the movie talk for music. No Michael Rapaport. It's just me. If you're a big fan of the Harloff Carpool, well, he took that fucking idea from me, okay? Because I do this show no, he didn't. But I do this show every single week by myself. It's fun. This specific week, if you're listening to this on a Friday afternoon, I'm doing my Justice League for music. So I came up with, you got these people in this team of the Justice League, and I've matched them up with their musical counterparts, and I've assembled a grade A team that's not quite as good as Marvel, and I'm very excited about it. So make sure you go and check that out. Ryan and I both have music. If you're listening to this on a Friday, it is New Music Friday. Happy New Music Friday. I just released a new song for my music project, Separator. Go check it out wherever music is found. Also on the Sight and Sound YouTube page. Just look for it. It's places.
That might have been your longest plug ever on anything, and I'm shocked that you actually took some time to promote your music project, because you've been very weird about that, and I thought I was the only person that would promote my band. Brave the Storm, coming out with new music very soon. Check out Strike Twice on Spotify and Google Play and Apple Music right this second.